So, your entire philosophy comes down to the one principle of love, and the incorporation of love into every aspect
of life.
Every
aspect of life. Politics, religion, medical profession, every single thing that you can think of in life. How you look at the environment, how you look at people, how you interact with your children, how you interact with your family, how you interact with, insects and animals and birds and all creatures that God's created.
It does pose the question of, if you were to treat an insect with love, an animal with love, plants with love, how are we supposed to survive if we do have to consume something else?
Well, let's look at the issues of love there, because there are many issues of love involved in consumption. Firstly, if we look at the issues of love, we can see that there are certain things that God has provided for us that regenerate as we eat them. So, for example, if we look at fruit, for example, we can see we can eat a whole tree of fruit. If we save the seeds and plant those seeds, there'll be literally thousands of fruit trees growing from those seeds. So we're not actually destroying the process by eating the fruit. We're actually creating a process that can grow. So we're actually, we're consuming the fruit, but actually enabling a complete process that will involve creation to a larger extent than was possible before. If we examine almost every vegetable thing, we can see that there are literally thousands of seeds produced by every vegetable thing generally. And this is an indication of plentiful, there's plenty, there's abundance. And to me, anything that's abundant is where we should go. Now, if we look at what happens with regard to meat production, and we look at consuming meat, we can see a very different course of action. If we look at what happens generally with the consumption of meat, we inseminate cattle, generally, we allow the cattle to procreate, they destroy the environment to a large degree, they take 10 times the amount of energy that it takes, and it's known as a fact that it's 10 times the amount of energy that it takes to produce the same amount of food, vegetable, 10 times for the animal than it does for the vegetable. This is a great indication that we should all be at least vegetarians, right, on the planet. Now, you will hear many millions and billions of people go into protest about that. However, if every single person on this planet ate meat to the same amount that people in the Western world do, we will not even have a planet left to live on if we continue just with that endeavour. So this tells me that it is not economical. It tells me that it's not feasible for long-term sustainability. So therefore it tells me that it can't be loving. In addition, if I look at the pain the animals go through, there's a very good movie that I suggest every single person watch called Earthlings. I don't know if you've ever seen it. We've got a copy of it here, but it's just an awesome movie explaining what mankind does to animals in meat production. If any person, like my own son who ate meat 3 times a day, watched that movie and he became a vegetarian overnight, right? Because it is so blatantly obvious that it's unloving what is happening to these animals, right? And if you watch a movie like that, and that movie was put together by a very clever group of people showing exactly what is happening to animals on the planet. If every person on the planet knew what was happening to animals, their own hearts would be so affected by it that they wouldn't be able to eat meat anymore. And the reality is that eating meat is very, very damaging, not only for the environment, it's damaging to human health, it's damaging to the animals themselves. They go through huge amounts of pain. Many of them go through huge amounts of torture in order for us to survive. These are all things that are not loving. It's quite obvious. And once we embrace that, and once we see that, and once we're willing to be educated about that, it's highly unlikely that we'll choose to eat meat after we've embraced that. Now, again, let's look at the religion of it. The Bible says that God gave Noah meat to eat. Right? And many Christian faiths use that as a justification to eat meat. And yet, how many people on this planet would be willing to kill the meat themselves and eat it? How many people in the Western world would be willing to slit the animal's throat, gut it, skin it, and then cut it up and then eat it? Very few, in fact. That's why we have butchers doing that for us, because we want to get away from these dirty processes that we often feel are quite bad, and we give them to somebody who's willing to do it, right, for the sake of some kind of financial reward. And the reason why we do that is because we don't want to be personally associated with an act that is obviously violent, and yet we let somebody else do it for us. And so I feel, again, if we took that underlying thing, that love is not violent. If we look at the average lettuce when it gets picked, there are no obvious feelings of violence that we can detect. So therefore, let's trust that for the moment. And unless in some point in the future we can detect that a lettuce feels violently treated once it's picked, then let's eat a lettuce instead. Than eating a lamb, or eating a young calf for veal, because if you look at the act towards the calf, it is obviously violent. And to me, again, it's a simple decision. Do I want to perpetrate a violent act towards my environment, or do I not? If I love, I won't. If I don't love or I don't care, then I may.
One of the large reasons for your stance, correct me if I'm wrong, against eating meat is that the production of the animals, cattle, chickens, etc., is damaging to the environment and thus is unloving, and is also
my biggest complaint against it, and again, this is just a comment, it's not a judgment, but my biggest complaint against it is I have personally killed an animal. I know what it feels like to kill one. Right? I've done it a number of times with my father when I was young, and I know what it feels like to kill one, and it feels like a violent act. Right? And I cannot perpetrate violence towards something that feels so strongly as a other living creature like an animal has, and that is my primary feeling about it. The issue of economy is secondary, but it is an issue. It does take 10 times the amount of energy to produce that amount of meat as it does to produce the amount of vegetables. And third reason why is I've been living this way for a long time now. The third reason why is I understand how the body works, and I know that the body needs amino acids, not proteins, in order to grow protein. And I know that, and I've seen that happen in my own body and in the bodies of others. And I also can see that the main reason why some people who go vegetarian have a degradation in their body is because of their belief systems that they have absorbed from their parents. The belief that the parent has that it's unhealthy to not eat meat is absorbed by the child, and that causes them to become unhealthy as a result. So I see all of these things, and that's why I'm healthy, but I'm vegan, but healthy. And I feel that this is something that each person, again, can experiment with and try. But it is a moral choice. So I cannot force it upon people. All I can do is make the suggestion. Try to stay at one with God and have a relationship with God and eat meat. And I can guarantee to you, you will not be able to feel God's love while you're eating meat.
Actually, I went to a youth conference about renewable energy sources, and I ended up driving, and I drove a group of girls. They were all vegan, so I ended up eating vegan for a weekend. And I can honestly say it wasn't bad. Thought it was gonna be terrible. Food was fantastic. Couldn't tell the difference. So no problem.
And also, most people on the planet have no idea how to use spices, and a person who's vegan generally learns after a while how to use spices, and after that, everything tastes fantastic.
This is true. The only thing I see is that just as the cattle takes energy to live, and it takes 10 times the vegetables, humans take by far more than cattle to survive. And yet we reproduce at such a high rate and populate the world. Is it unloving to have such a high population to where people are forced into situations that are less than in Western we'd call, livable?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, firstly, it's not well known, but there's been studies made on the planet already, scientific studies that have been made that have resulted in concepts that the planet can actually support 10 times the amount of people that it currently supports, and still have enough vegetation on the planet to support other functions such as our breathing and other things like that. So the reality is the planet can actually support 60 billion people. Now, I'm not suggesting that we do that, but I'm saying the reality is that we can support that. But we can't support that amount of people eating meat at all. And in fact, if we chose to have everyone on the planet currently eating meat as much as the average person in the Western world eats meat, we would find that our planet can't support as many people as we currently have. So if we examine that particular position, we've got to start asking ourselves, what are we doing that is saving or sustainable for the earth? And so while it is possible that we can eat meat, and when we can, because we can physically do it if we wish to, the question then becomes, is it advisable? It's like, it's possible for you to smoke a cigarette, but is it advisable? It's possible for you to have sex with hundreds of women if you want, but is it advisable? These are the questions we've got to start asking ourselves. And this is where it gets down to the morality of it. And morality is always going to be based around love. So we need to start asking ourselves, even though it's possible that we can eat meat, and many people are doing it, is it the best thing that we can do? Is it the thing that we can do for our own health? Is it the best thing for our own health? Now, it's starting to be, different studies have come up recently that, people starting to see that more red meat in your diet is linked to specific diseases, for example. And we're starting to see the link between diet and disease in the Western culture. Now, these studies, of course, have been done with lots of resistance, because most of us in the Western world want to eat meat, so we don't like to pay taxpayer fund towards a study that proves that we shouldn't. And what we need to do with all matters, I believe, and this applies to all matters scientific of any nature, we need to be willing to see a new truth. The only way we can be willing to see a new truth is to be willing to let go of the old one. In other words, we're going to have to be humble. And humility requires, new truth will never come to us unless we are in a state of humility. But humility requires that we are self-analytical, that we're honest with the way that we see ourselves. The problem I feel that we have here on the planet is most of us have been taught to be dishonest about how we see ourselves. And in fact, many Western cultures are based around a facade completely. It's all about the car and the house and the pretty girl on your arm, rather than what's actually happening inside of yourself, inside of your feelings and emotions. And in fact, often there's very few people around us who actually know us as a result. Many people do not know us because we've presented the facade for such a long time that we've come to believe it ourselves. But there are private times by ourselves that we feel differently. I feel what we all need to do is be willing to be humble, see ourselves as we accurately are, see also that unless we're humble, we will not accept new scientific truth. We will not accept things like, the fact is it takes 10 times the amount of energy to produce the same amount of food if we eat meat compared to eating vegetables. So surely this would tell us that if we want to love the rest of mankind and have enough food on the planet, then surely the best course of action is to eat vegetables, rather than to try to say, give them all contraceptive. Because giving them all contraceptive doesn't actually solve the problem in a lot of ways, but also giving them all contraceptive doesn't look at this problem that we have, and that is this problem that we're willing to use 10 times of the resources for the same effect. Now, why are we willing to do such a silly thing? right? When you think about it, it is a silly thing to use 10 times of the resource for the same effect. You might as well use 10 times less and you have the same effect. So, you know, it doesn't make any sense from an environmental perspective, from a love perspective, from a love of other people perspective, to continue doing that. And what we need to do is be open to that concept. And if we're not open to the concept, we want to eat meat, we're just going to say, no, I'm not going to look at that concept for the rest of our lives. But the problem is there's all this violence being perpetrated towards animals, there's all these violent things happening to the environment as a result of our choice, but we're all blaming it on somebody else. Because they're the ones who did, you know, they're the ones who knocked down the football field. It wasn't me eating the meat that did it. But, you know, myself and Mary had just been to Brazil. A lot of that country, the Amazon rainforest, being destroyed, like acre after acre after acre being destroyed systematically just for the production of beef. And that's why it's being destroyed. And when you look at the difference between the Amazon forest and the actual parts that have been destroyed, you wouldn't recognise them. There's no that they are so far apart from each other that most people would be absolutely shocked if they actually saw it. Now, this is an indication that our choice and decision is out of harmony with love. It's quite obvious, but most of us don't want to accept it. And this is where I say, you know, getting back to our original discussion, when we start confronting the issues of love, then people complain. Interesting, you know. Then people's pet desires are all challenged, you know. But if we're going to truly be a loving society, we are going to have to challenge all of our pet personal desires if we're truly going to change as a society. And this applies to religion, politics, environment, every aspect, as I've said.
Yeah. Getting back to the